Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. This week's episode, Camp Fear, hits my bias for all things creepy just right. In what I assume to be a throwback to older horror movies, Ben and his family get trapped at a camp filled with mushroom monsters. There's even a soothing voiced mushroom brain below the surface controlling everything. What more could you ask for? Well, a brand new alien for Ben to combat this fungus called Wildvine, that's what. Up until this episode, I had completely forgotten this alien existed. Maybe in trying to scrub my brain of all things Ben 10 2016, I also managed to get a little scrap of OG Wildvine in there. Either way, it makes perfect sense for this plant alien to make an appearance just as Ben is battling another, plant. And it even allows him to communicate with the fungus, so that's a nice addition too. Really, this whole episode was a lot of fun, watching the kids and Ben scramble to survive this fungus invasion and managing to bring Ben and Gwen closer together. You know there's a lesson or moral inbound when the episode starts with the cousins arguing and then introduce twins later who magically get along. It's a little on the nose, especially when those two twins, Andy and Mandy, begin to not get along so well later in the episode. But what's an action cartoon without characters learning something in between the hectic battles? I enjoy this episode so much, thanks to that ever-present, near-claustrophobic, fearful tone that permeated it. The writers definitely captured the feel of a horror movie without getting all gruesome like the horror flicks of these days. Makes me yearn for a Ben 10 horror spinoff, or just another horror cartoon in general. Anyway, my point is, if you've got time to kill and want some subdued chills, then check out Camp Fear. Turn off the lights, grab some popcorn, and just relax for half an hour. You'll enjoy it, I promise. But if you've already caught this episode, which I suspect many have, share your thoughts on it down below. To watch Ben 10 yourself, I'd suggest Amazon or maybe buying the episodes off YouTube. Be sure to subscribe for more cartoon content weekly, and check out my merch store and Patreon if you'd like to support what I do on this channel. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. This is a show I've been kind of looking forward to seeing for a few months now, despite never looking that much into it. I tend to avoid previews and things so I can make up my own mind and be surprised when I actually watch it. See, I love spooky things, and while this is nowhere near like horror movie level, The Ghost and Molly McGee gives me huge Courage the Cowardly Dog or even Casper vibes. The series is about the titular character Molly moving into a new house that's haunted by the ghost Scratch. The latter has kept the town of Brighton miserable for a while, something that some ghost council keeps track of. This is a part that heavily reminds me of Casper, the movies and cartoon stuff specifically, where there's some big fancy ghosts judging how good the others are at scares. It could honestly be a part of the Casper universe without being too jarring, but it's its own thing. Molly proves to be a problem for Scratch, who wants nothing more than to scare her out of his house. She's hyper and optimistic, which in fiction is a perfect counterpart to the grumpy character Scratch. Just from the first episode alone, the two bounce off each other perfectly. It's a fun little dynamic that I think can definitely carry the entire show, with parts of it even reminding me of Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and how they owned him as a best friend forever. Of course, there will likely be some criticism of there being yet another hyper-female Disney character in the vein of Mabel from Gravity Falls or Star Butterfly. But as far as this episode goes, I don't think she's too overbearing just yet. It helps to have, to parrot someone else, a character to ground her. That being Scratch, obviously. This is one of those 2 11-minute segments type cartoons. So you've got The Curse up first, and then First Day Frights. The first half of this episode is just setup. It introduces Molly, Scratch, the Ghost Council people, and Molly's family. It's a decent enough start, and I got a genuine laugh out of some of the bits in this half, like this scene here at the start. It's random, but funny. Other than that, there isn't really much else to comment on in this episode. I personally enjoyed First Day Frights the best, as it gets us out of the house and lets us see how the characters interact at Molly's school. Molly is stressed over being an outcast, and Scratch is trying to make her day the worst. It's a fun episode, with different hijinks occurring thanks in part to Scratch. One of my favorite moments being either Molly dragging Andrea around in a janitor's cart after being scared unconscious by Scratch, or maybe Andrea's freak out earlier of her name being mispronounced twice. Some other highlights from this episode were the family themselves. They all seem like great, funny characters, from the sassy grandma to the weird, quirky dad. I especially loved him and seeing his reactions to Molly's ghost friend and him abandoning his family at first.
Leave the cereal! Leave everything! Leave yourself!
As for the mother and brother, they don't get too much room to really express themselves in this first episode, but they don't seem like awful characters, and I'm sure future episodes will give them some more focus. There's also a musical sequence in this episode. I don't know if this is going to be a recurring theme in the show, but it's not outright terrible. When I think of amazing songs in a Disney show, I default, obviously, to Phineas and Ferb. And while this show has no connection to that one, besides the channel it airs on, the Ghost and Molly McGee will have to work really hard to wow me with their songs, because this one wasn't the best. In general, I think this show could be a hit. It's wonderfully animated with a really cool, unique art style that I haven't really seen in a while. And the voice cast really brings their characters to life. Even Ashley Birch does a good job as the main character. And I recognize the voice actor for Scratch from such shows as Chowder and Co-Monkey, so I'm really excited that he's on the show. It's also a perfect show for the Halloween season, and should get you in the appropriate mood easily enough. And that will be it from me. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below, as well as letting me know if you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing for more reviews like this. And if you want early access to these videos, you can become a member and get cool perks like early access to videos at least a week ahead of everyone else, or member exclusive videos. Thanks for watching, and take care.
I think we found ourselves a clue.
Scooby-Doo! Where are you? Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout and the first day of Scooby Universe, the rebranded Scooby Month. As the name suggests, the series will be me reviewing or talking about Scooby media. This time we'll be returning to Be Cool Scooby-Doo with Season 2, Episode 12, Do Not Disturb. The start of this episode could legit be its own horror movie. While there are creepy and sometimes scary moments in Scooby-Doo, it's still largely a mystery comedy cartoon at the end of the day. This one intro was pretty scary. You have a woman alone in a hotel room with various rules plastered on signs. Each time she momentarily doesn't follow the rules, a noise starts up that sounds almost like ticking. It's only after obeying that it goes away. And when she finally does fully break one, and the front desk says they can no longer help her, that's when the monster shows up. Again, straight up could be a horror film of its own. Whoever came up with this intro needed a raise. The plot for the episode concerns the gang seeking refuge from a snowstorm in a fairly odd hotel with, as stated before, lots of engraved rules around, while also having the gang challenge Fred to not be as controlling. I actually really liked the plot for this one, even if I think Fred did nothing wrong. It led to a lot of comedic moments, as Fred tried to hold in his controlling behavior. The ghost mother was also really chilling to watch in almost every scene, especially when Scoob and Shaggy are trapped in an elevator, and she manages to get in, and in a surprise twist, is not fooled by their disguises. Sure, you could argue she's just a typical ghost old lady, but her tisking and waving her finger is downright scary to imagine. She's got a really neat design overall. Now, one criticism for this episode that I would probably have was Daphne, which is bizarre because I normally enjoy this version of Daphne. But in most episodes, her Daphneisms don't quite get in the way, per se. This one, she straight up left her friends outside in the hall while a ghost mom was approaching them just to do some feng shui. Not cool, Daphne. Not cool. And my final criticism for the episode really has to be the moments towards the end of the episode with the caretaker, Reggie. It came out of left field, and I was left really confused because it wasn't super clear what happened. Supposedly, he had been tied up by the villain of the episode so that they could pretend to be him, but we weren't clearly shown that. There's him with ropes on his hand, but there's a blink and you'll miss it shot. You might even overlook it because why would you assume he's been tied up till now? Maybe he was working with ropes. I don't know. Feels like they really wanted to do the whole, whoa, it was me? Wait, but I'm me scene, but didn't think it through by revealing Reggie had been tied up most of the episode. As for things that I enjoyed about the episode, it has some really awesome, creepy background designs. I think this is always an underrated element of Be Cool Scooby-Doo that's overlooked by a lot of people. Like, when this show wants something to look ghoulish, they can and will. A couple off the top of my head are when Fred is walking down the hall to Mother's room, and then when the gang are in the basement with the doll heads and disembodied hands. Another thing I need to bring up is that one of the most spoken criticisms about this iteration is that it looks like Family Guy, a claim that I usually object to. For whatever reason, though, the scenes after the theme song played were oddly like Family Guy, or at least reminded me of it, actually. The cadence in which Fred spoke in the van at one point, or to the front desk, felt eerily similar to if Family Guy had done it. It was really weird, because it's not something I've noticed till now. Not really a criticism or a praise, just an irregularity, honestly. Also, a fair bit of this episode reminded me of the original series That Snow Ghost for the snowed-in hotel and obviously creepy employees, The Shining for their brief respite outside the hotel in the snow, and of course, Psycho because of the son running the hotel while alluding to a deceased mother and a room that no one's supposed to go into. I don't know if the latter was an influence to the writers and animators at all, but it really stuck out to me. Personally, I think Do Not Disturb was a good episode to return to with Scooby Universe. It grabbed me with this chilling opening and had me smiling a lot at some of the funny moments involving Fred, or Scooby and Shaggy. There were a couple of flubs with Daphne, but overall this is another quality Be Cool Scooby-Doo episode. If you still have not watched this show because you were told it was Family Guy or the Teen Titans Go version of Scooby-Doo, please do me the favor of at least watching one episode. This one, if you don't want to have to go looking for one. Anyways, that's going to be it for me. Please chime in below with your thoughts on this episode, and I will see you next time for more Scooby Universe. Thanks for watching, and take care.
I am back, way back! What is that?
Oh, you don't know? That's Father.
Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout Reanimated, your place for all things cartoon. Do you ever sometimes just pick something to watch, not because it looks particularly interesting, but because it's new? I did that with this show. I wanted to cover some new upcoming shows and movies, and I thought, hey, this doesn't look like garbage, so I'll add it to my list. And then it turns out to be good? What? A Tale Dark and Grim, not to get too dramatic or anything, it's probably one of the best new cartoons that I've seen in years. And that's just based on this first episode. Sure, it could go massively downhill later on, but man, am I hyped about this show. You know how when you're a kid, you're led to believe that the Disney fairy tales are the accurate ones, but when you're older, you find out the stories are much, much darker than you were ever told? This series seems primed to take the old fairy tales and bring them back to their darker origins, while doing so in a dark, comedic tone. And I, for one, am here for it. Give me more shows like this, please. Ones that aren't too afraid to maybe scar kids a bit, like their predecessors, Courage and Grim Adventures did. I honestly couldn't really stop comparing the show to those older ones as I watched it. From parents who behead their kids, to gruesome falls onto candy cane fences, this first episode doesn't exactly shy away from being refreshingly dark. The narrative is told via 3 ravens, who do help to add some comedic balance, so the show never gets too off the rails. Like, kids still need to be able to watch this.
Alright, can we just check in on the children who are watching this right now? Are you guys all okay out there? How about that, little kid? You're still here? A woman just got impaled on a peppermint stick.
If you can laugh off the darker moments, you'll probably be okay, right? When they kinda show the kids Hansel and Gretel being decapitated, I thought, okay, so it'll be kinda dark but tasteful. Then there's a later scene that comes out and just, whoa. Didn't expect it. It was amazing. I grinned so much. Yes, I'm talking about grinning at a horrifying death scene in a show for kids. I'm a psychopath. I've already gushed too much without really talking about what the show is. As you can tell, it's a reimagining of Hansel and Gretel, that old story about two kids who almost get eaten by a witch. Except the story doesn't end when they defeat her. No, the show is going to further explore these two as they escape their own story. It isn't the first time there's been something like this, but A Tale Dark and Grim seems like it's going to do it really well. It sets up some mysterious characters, so you're tempted to watch more, and leaves viewers with an, oh, are the kids not going to be safe again? Moment. In sort of like an animated version of a series of unfortunate events. I also think framing the story around the Ravens and their take on what the kids are doing or how the story is progressing is really smart. It's not groundbreaking, but it helps that the Ravens are as fun to see as the main characters. The Ravens don't distract from what's going on, and often add some colorful commentary. More shows should probably take notes on how this show hooks you almost from the beginning and doesn't let you go. Heck, I wanted to watch more, but I'm going to wait a few more days before I binge it. Also, the animation is so good. It's really fitting, and reminds me a bit of Shrek for some reason, but that might be the fairy tale theme. Though that movie could be dark at times too when it came to the fairy tales, so maybe my comparison isn't too out there. I don't know why I'm so shocked that a modern CGI cartoon looks so great, but it has this movie-level quality to it. A Tale Dark and Grim is a surprisingly good show, or at least this episode is. Great characters, a deliciously dark tone that isn't too much for a younger viewer, and equally beautiful animation. This, along with The Ghost and Molly McGee, is the perfect show to watch this month. Maybe even more so, honestly. If I were to give out scores, it'd be a 9 out of 10 on this one. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Night of the Living Dead is as classic as horror movies go. Created by the late Romero, it's considered not only one of the best horror movies of all time, but also one of the best zombie movies. The film is often credited as the birthplace of the modern zombie, with tons of movies and projects paying homage and respect to the movie years later. Due to a mistake on Romero's part, the movie was public domain, meaning anyone could take the film and do what they want. This has led to a host of remakes and reboots even to this day, which is how something like this recent film, Night of the Animated Dead, came to be. It's not the first time Romero's classic has been remade in animation. I've even reviewed one of the previous attempts a few years ago. And honestly, I've always believed someone should redo the movie as a cartoon. There are so many creative things you can do in animation, and we're short on horror cartoons to begin with. So when I saw this movie existed, I knew I had to watch it. I mean, look at that beautiful cover art. This is gonna look... Oh. Yeah. Talk about misleading covers. Well, certainly a step up from the awful CGI take on the original, Night of the Animated Dead is hardly what I'd call a good-looking cartoon. Actually, it looks more like an Adult Swim show. It's animated similarly, too. It's a shame, because the background, and even some of the CGI for the vehicles, looks nice. And then you have this eyesore plastered on top of them. I googled the animation studio after I finished the movie, and all their other works look great. Seriously, their 2D animation is gorgeous. So how in the world did they make this? Maybe in trying to replicate the style of the original, they ended up stumbling a bit. Because this is pretty bad by 2021 standards. And it was published by Warner Brothers of all companies. No one checked to see if the animation looked good? But what of the story, you ask? Well, it's Night of the Living Dead. The animated remake doesn't veer too far from the original, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. It's faithful to a T, but it also doesn't do much else. It does feature loads more gory shots than the black and white film, which is pretty neat to see, but if you've seen the original, then you've already seen this one. For a time, I even thought they hadn't redubbed it and just used the voices from the original. I checked though, and they did bring in new voice actors. So, another positive mark in the film's favor, because I almost couldn't tell the difference. I held out hope that this would be a fantastic animated remake of a beloved horror movie. It's something I've wanted for years now, so it's a bit disappointing to see that we still don't have a good one yet. While I am generally in favor of faithful remakes, I think the movie could have done more than just add more detailed zombie kills. Some exploration of the characters would have been nice. It's not the worst thing that's come out this year, and it may even be worth watching for the animated gimmick alone, but I expected more. And this wasn't it. Have you seen Night of the Animated Dead? Share your opinion on it down below, and what other horror films would you like to see get the animated dead treatment? Preferably not by this studio. Thanks for watching, and take care.
It's Cartoon Hangout, whoa, with Archaic King as your host. It's time to review some great cartoons, from Craig of the Creek to Scooby-Doo. Hello, lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon.
Hello, lords and ladies! Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Recently, I sat down to finally watch Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, the latest installment in the Resident Evil CGI series, although this one is 4 episodes. I'm a big fan of the RE series, even though I've never actually played any of the games, so I was really anticipating this. First off, I want to say that it's not a bad show. I had a pretty time binging my way through its 4 episodes last night. It's set between the 4th game and the 5th game, following Leon and Claire as they navigate their way through a political conspiracy that could set off war between China and the US, among a couple other things. If you're thinking that doesn't sound very horror-like, then you'd be right. The show is kind of an odd one in that it's neither got a lot of the survival horror elements like the original games or movies, nor the overuse of action like the later entries in films. It's somewhere in between, which is probably my first complaint. I went into this thinking there'd be a decent combination of both, sort of like prior entries in the series. Instead, you get mostly political intrigue and not a lot of much else. Don't come into this expecting a bunch of crazy enemies either. There's zombies, but not that many, and not for too long. And then there's like an episode with some crazy rats, and then of course, the final bad guy. The story for the show spends some time on war flashbacks for some of its newer characters, which they're not boring per se, but that's gonna be where most of the action is. The writers also seem to forget that Claire exists at points, because despite being billed as a main character, she is given way too little screen time compared to Leon, or anyone else for that matter. I get that their separation is a bit like the games having 2 different routes, Leon being the action guy and her being more of an investigator. But the show doesn't do much with that. She's generally always a step behind Leon in the audience and never discovers much that we don't already know. And then she gets kidnapped, and later knocked out for the last part of the finale. Personally, I would have made her segments have this creepy, claustrophobic, atmospheric vibe, where she's exploring for clues in a residential area or something, and dealing with zombies and more enemies. While Leon could have the more action, spy, thriller heavy elements. But instead, she does mostly nothing that aids in the show's plot, or even Leon, at least until the confrontation towards the end. Despite that, Claire and of course Leon are really well written in this show. She may not be doing much in the show, but she's at least funny and interesting to watch nonetheless. Too bad her and Leon share so little scenes, because I loved them together when they were. Some of the side characters are a bit off in their lines or stories, but everyone else feels pretty much decent. Minus one character's hackneyed attempt to spread terror, which he spouts out about as much as the one Final Fantasy character talking about killing chaos. Now, speaking of that, the villains in the season are not much to write home about. They're no Wesker, that's for sure. One is a cliche, corrupt politician whose motivations are paper thin and aren't interesting. And the other is, well, he's the Hulk, but if he only jumped around trying to escape up to the surface while Leon shoots him. I'm only exaggerating that a little bit. The final fight with this guy is weak as hell, and the bad guy barely does anything, let alone fight Leon. He just hops around and flails around like a child when stopped by Claire or Leon. The dude is also killed off really quick. Honestly, his human form was way more interesting than when he finally transformed. Now, that sounds like a lot of criticism, but I do recommend it for fans of the series, or of the CGI movies. I mean, with this amount of criticism, it's still better than any of the live action movies. Because it's not all bad, and generally it was a fun watch, regardless of some of the flaws. At least when Leon or Claire are on screen anyways. One thing that I'll note that's not a flaw of the show, but more in how it was presented, is why is this divided into 4 episodes? It feels less like a show, even by Netflix binge standards, and more like it was a 2-hour film before being cut up into 4 separate episodes. I say this because this is the same CGI series as the other movies, and it feels like it's a part of those, canonically, but it's weirdly cut up this way. And since you would probably binge them all in one go, considering they're only 28 minutes apiece, cutting them up like this seems weird. But yeah, anyways, those are my thoughts on this show. I have no idea if they're going to make more seasons of this, or if this was just like a one-off thing or whatever. But if they do, I might give them a watch. I might talk about them, because like I said, I'm really into the Resident Evil series lore and characters and whatnot. Hopefully, though, the next series, whether it's be a standalone movie or divided up into episodes, improves a lot more. Thanks for watching, and take care.